Allison Sargent joins me on the set for the press review today. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Jeannie.
Lots of focus, of course, on that summit between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, it's the day the whole planet has its eyes on Geneva. That's the front page headline from Swiss paper Le Temps today. Their cartoon by Patrick Chapat shows Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin separated by an enormous china vase, a symbol of how delicate this encounter is, as well as a possible nod towards China as a third presence looming over their discussions. According to Le Temps, Putin has already been exerting psychological pressure on Joe Biden by pushing back his own arrival to Geneva multiple times. Lots of anticipation in the European papers as well. Libération's headline here basically translates to "We meet again." The paper writes that the meeting has a Cold War air about it. They predict that it will be rich in tension, but poor in terms of any significant development.
So that's for the European papers. What have the American papers been saying?
Well, according to the New York Times, this meeting is really all about respect. The paper writes that Putin has, quote, long sought the West's respect, and with Biden, he will have a rare opportunity to get it. According to the New York Times, the wounds in Moscow are still raw from the tumult of the Trump years, when his hopes for a thaw were ultimately dashed by sanctions and rising tensions with the U.S. But the Biden administration is generally perceived as far tougher on Russia than Trump ever was. We see that in this cartoon by Matt Davies. U.S. foreign policy, you can see, is under new management. The conditions are no soul, no shirt, no service, which seems to be a reference to Biden actually saying once that he didn't believe that Putin had a soul.
Now, what about the Russian papers? Are they expecting much out of this meeting?
There's really not a lot of fanfare in the Russian press today. This story is really only on the front page of one paper, Moskovsky Komsomolets. The tabloid spoke to a former White House advisor and Russia specialist who said, quote, no one wants to build a partnership. The goal is to avoid a war. A similar analysis from the Moscow Times. They write that there are no illusions in Moscow. Adversarial relations with Washington are here to stay. And the paper adds that Putin does not need this meeting as proof that he is already on equal footing with Joe Biden.
All right, let's move on now to something completely different. Algeria, where the country's announced the results of its legislative elections.
Yeah, the vote over the weekend saw record abstention, so it's no surprise that the ruling party, the FLN, came out on top. Government paper Al Mujaid shakes off the fact that official turnout was just 23%. They argue that voter abstention is not unique to Algeria. They say it's also seen in some of the most established democracies. Opposition paper Liberté Algérie, though, disagrees. For them, this is really a sign of the ongoing support for the Hirak protest movement, even after 2 years of government suppression. Meanwhile, Algerian cartoonist Hik draws the ruling FLN and their allies, the RND, as Jack and Rose, having sort of a romantic moment there on the prow of the Titanic, which represents Algeria. The message here is that they are the kings of a sinking ship. And then cartoonist Dilem reminds us that Algeria revoked France 24's press access. We see this general here throwing France 24's press accreditation into the trash, and he's saying, I voted.
All right, let's come back now to France on a happier note, where there is celebration in the press after France beat Germany 1-0 in Munich.
Yeah, and French papers really seem to be enjoying rubbing it in today. Le Parisien's headline is a reference to a famous quote about football. That quote is, football is a simple game. 22 men chase a ball for 90 minutes, and at the end, the Germans win. Except for Le Parisien has changed that quote, and their headline is, at the end, France wins. Meanwhile, French sports paper L'Equipe headlines that France was victorious, just like in 18. It very much feels like a not-so-tasteful reference to victory over Germany at the end of World War I in 1918, although the paper's editorial only talks about France's World Cup win in 2018. You might remember that that final also saw France's opponents score on themselves, much like Germany did on Tuesday night. German tabloid Bild here headlines in exasperation for Hummel's sake, because that own goal was scored by the player, Mats Hummels. They lament that, quote, we finished ourselves off.
That big win for France in the Euro 2020. Allison, just to wrap up now, a very revealing fashion trend in women's leggings.
Yeah, culture website Jezebel is calling them butt crack leggings, which really says it all. You can check out this photo from Jezebel. The pair you see here is from the singer Rihanna's fashion line. They're not meant to be worn outside, but it has caused people to wonder if maybe butt cleavage is going to start to be a normal thing. This Jezebel writer is very much opposed. She writes, "Can I please please keep the contours of my butt crack to myself. I have to say that's mostly how I feel, but there are other people in the newsroom who are very eager to get a pair of shoes.
All right, Allison, something to know about. Thank you so much for that. Allison Sargent there with the press review.